Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Thursday in the Temple Development Hub live on the YouTube channel, our second live stream here on the YouTube channel. And today I'm joined by two fabulous friends, colleagues, ELT professionals. We've got Jordan Putman from ELI, Ellie,
Hello.
and Michelle Worgan from Inspiring Inquiries.
Hi everyone.
And so this is a session that we delivered as a three. I was going to say threesome then, no. That we delivered as a team at the ATHEIA conference last November. So ATHEIA is our regional teachers association. And then Jordan kind of suggested, we could give it as a session for all the folks in the TEFL Development Hub as well. So thank you very much, Jordan, for the suggestion. So we're going to be chatting today a little bit about the different directions that our careers have taken in ELT. And then we'll chat about some other options that are out there as well. So first of all, a little bit about each of us. Jordan, who are you and what is your role?
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Jordan. I am a centre director here at Ellie in Seville. It is one of the largest of our centres, and my job basically is to run the centre. So I'll get into it a little bit later on. It's slightly different to a normal DOS or a director of studies role. But yeah, I'm a centre director at Ellie.
Fantastic. And Michelle.
So I'm a freelance materials writer. That's I guess my main role at the moment. And I write materials for primary learners for different publishers. And I also write my own materials, which I self-publish, and I do a little bit of teacher training as well.
Fantastic. And I'm T. I'm a finger in many pies sort of person. So I'm going to be chatting today about teacher training. I train on the Trinity Dip TESOL for Oxford TEFL and the Cert TESOL for active language. I do some materials writing as well. I'm also called an educational consultant. I do some projects with the Consultants E and some other teacher training aside from Dip TESOL and Cert TESOL as well. So Michelle, what does your job entail?
Well, it actually entails quite a few things. I think when people think of materials writing, they're thinking of course books, yeah, students' books. But actually, I work on a variety of different components. So yes, I do write students' books, but I also write activity books and teachers' books. I've worked on digital products and the digitalization of print products. I've written supplementary materials like tests, not my favorite thing, projects, extra grammar activities, also not my favorite thing. But there's, quite a few different things that you could work on as a materials writer. And I've done a bit of everything really. And always in the primary young learner market. So yeah, basically what I do.
Do you think this is an unplanned question? Do you think people tend to focus within a certain area of ELT? Like you talk about being a primary materials writer.
I think for that kind of thing, yes. So, a lot of people will specialize in primary or in very young learners, maybe very young learners, so pre-primary and primary, some people. Other people focus on secondary, other people adult, other people exams. I think you can, of course, we've all taught, most of us have taught all of these age groups, but I think you do kind of need to specialize slightly or to some extent, is very different writing materials for the first level of primary and then writing, Cambridge First B2 materials. So I think most people probably do tend to kind of niche a little bit there.
Fantastic. And Jordan, what does your job as an academic manager entail?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before then, my job here at Ellie is slightly different to what a normal academic manager would be, perhaps. So in Ellie, we have two kind of streams. Let's say we have the DOS or the academic director, and then we have centre directors. So what a DOS would normally do, if you do get a job as a DOS, would be like exam writing, syllabus design, communications with publishers, books decisions, and things like that. However, my job is slightly a little bit more administrative, let's say. I do still make academic decisions in terms of if students need to maintain within a level, they can't progress, or if they need to be jumped from one level to another level. So there are some minor academic decisions that I do make, but it's not like the bulk of my work, let's say. The bulk of my work is kind of running a school, dealing with customers, customer service, leading like the professional development of my teachers, making sure that they're on track and developing into the ways that they can develop into. Also maybe overseeing exams and report writing, making sure the reports are up to standard that go out to customers. And also some informal observations. Normally that is done by the DOSes. But my job can also be to do some informal observations. I might do them before the main observations to give them some minor hints or tricks before their main observations. So some minor academic stuff, but mainly it's administering the center and making sure that it's running correctly day to day.
Fantastic. So I guess because you work in what is a really big franchise, I mean, I think ELE has 14 schools in Seville.
Yeah,
Yeah,
14
so
16 in Andalusia.
wow. Yeah, so obviously the role of an academic manager and a DOS might be more melded together if someone is working in a smaller institution.
Yeah, perhaps if you're just working in a family-run school, or you might have those two jobs being combined together, you're kind of going to have to wear many hats simultaneously. If you're working at a larger institution that maybe has different franchises, like what Ellie does, there might be a little bit more separation between the different jobs, and it might be that you're doing more specific things and someone else is doing the more academic side of things. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And so
What about you, T?
thank you very much. I was just going to launch into a spiel there.
Go for it.
So there's a bit of a difference between teacher training on the Cert TESOL and teacher training on the DIP TESOL. So when you're teacher training on the Cert TESOL, obviously the course is aimed at, it's a pre-service qualification. You tend to get a lot of teachers who do have experience, but who are looking to kind of get a formal qualification. But generally it's aimed at people who are just coming into teaching. So then you do things like writing TP points. So when the teachers are going to be teaching, at the start of the course, you write them very detailed lesson plan TP points to kind of help structure their lessons. And then that obviously take away some of that support as they go through the course. And then there's things at both levels, Cert TESOL and DIP TESOL, of delivering input sessions, pastoral care as well, making sure that people are coping with the demands of the course, as well as a certain amount of helping them with organization as well. Certainly for the Cert TESOL, there's a lot of paperwork that people need to keep on top of. And so, helping them with making sure things are in the right place and making sure they filled in things correctly and giving feedback as well on the type of comments that they're making in their written work to help them develop more as reflective teachers. And then obviously a big part of the teacher training on the Cert TESOL and DIP TESOL for me is observations. So going in, watching teachers teach, and then providing feedback to them. So yeah, that was, in a nutshell, I would say that's what I do.
And another unscripted question, and how do you find that feedback process is different between the CELTA and the Cert TESOL and the Trinity DIP TESOL? How do you find it different?
Very good question. So I find with the Cert TESOL, a lot of it at the beginning as well is confidence and really highlighting the positives, because for some people this is the first time they've ever stepped into a classroom, it's the first time they've ever been in that situation. So I think a lot of it is very much this was really good and this was really good and let's tweak this a little bit, and then when you get to the DIP TESOL, similarly, you still want people to feel confident, but at that level, people have been teaching for at least 3 years, and there are kind of stricter criteria for them to be passing. So you need to make sure that the feedback addresses those points. And I would say sometimes, unfortunately, when it comes to the DIP TESOL, teachers are thrown into a classroom that's very different to what their everyday teaching is. And so sometimes that can be a bit of a shock to the system. And so you still have to, you have to balance your feedback because these people are good teachers, but they're not able to demonstrate the skills perhaps that they have in this structured environment of the dip TESOL assessments. So yeah, a lot of, again, positivity and constructive criticism, I would say.
Interesting.
So Michelle, how did you get into materials writing?
Well, I just worked that out. It's like 10 years since I started writing materials, and um, I my first job was to digitalize some activities from a course book, and then I moved into writing teachers' books and supplementary materials, and then I went through all of the stages kind of thing, from the kind of not easiest, because I don't think it's the easiest thing to write, but kind of like I guess there's less pressure to write to make something digital or to write some simple activities than writing a whole unit of a course book, for example. And so the way I got this job actually was I got this contact through what used to be the ELT Teachers to Writers database. Now, this is a thing that existed at the time. It's now called ELT Publishing Professionals, and it's a paid service. At the time, it was a free service, and you could apply for jobs. And I applied for this teacher's book writing job, and I did a sample for them. And I didn't get it. Okay, I didn't get the job. It was the first time I'd ever written a sample. It was the first time I'd ever written to a brief. I probably didn't do it very well. I don't know. I mean, I got mixed feedback on it. So the good thing was I got feedback on that sample. So I didn't get that job, but I think a year or two later, the same publisher contacted me and asked if I wanted to work on these digital materials. So through doing that sample and through just kind of applying and saying, look, I'd like to do this. Can you give me an opportunity? Which didn't lead directly to a job, but it did then, through those same people, lead to my first job. So that's how I started writing for publishers. And I've worked on lots of projects with that same publisher since then, and I can continue to do so. And it can be hard to get onto the books of publishers, I think. So if you've got some kind of a way in like that, I think that's really helpful. Now, I will say that before I did any of that, so the years before that, I'd already decided that I wanted to try materials writing or do something different. And so I tried to create kind of an online presence, I guess. So I had a blog. I know you remember this, T. You had one at the same time. It was the blogging moment. Now, a lot of us had blogs and we read each other's. So I was sharing my classroom ideas, the things that I was doing in the classroom. I was sharing them on the blog. And I also wrote a few articles for different magazines. And then I started presenting at conferences. So this was all kind of like prep work for, I was just trying to become a bit more visible, I think, because prior to that, I'd just been working in a small school, didn't really have that many connections. So I just wanted to get my name out there. So that's kind of how I got into the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you, sorry, T, how did you feel when you took that, like, when you submitted that first proposal, let's say, or you wrote to the brief and you sent it off for the first time, it ended in not getting the job, but how did it feel to make that leap and to start doing it and to send it off, basically? How did that feel? Or how did you convince yourself to do it? Or like, what was the process like?
Well, I don't know. It was quite a long time ago now. But it was exciting, no, because I was thinking, oh, and I thought I was doing a good job, but obviously I really didn't know, because how would you know? Because you've never had any feedback on your materials before. Um, and it's very different also writing materials for your students and seeing how they work in the classroom, from writing for some students that you don't know, for a different context. I don't remember the course this was for now, but I don't remember if it was British English or American English. I don't remember what markets it was for, but it was different from my local market, no? So I really didn't know how, whether I was doing it well or not, it was
Just throwing
um
yourself into it and seeing what
yeah,
happens.
you just, I wrote it as if I guess, as if I would write it for my students, and that might not have been the best way to go about it because it wasn't for my students. So,
And so before you started materials writing, obviously you'd done it for your own students before. Had you done any sort of training or had you taken any qualifications aimed at that?
not then, because there weren't really any qualifications or courses at that time. So we're talking about 10 years ago. I think probably the only training available really was part of a master's, maybe. But since then, so in the years following that, I have taken a few courses. I actually started with the ELT Teachers to Writers books. There's a series of books on all different aspects of materials writing, and those were really helpful in writing specific types of activities. They're very practical as well. So that was really good for me in the first few years when I started writing actual materials, not necessarily the digitalization, which didn't really require much writing itself. I also did Niall's module in materials development, which is part of their master's program, but you can do it as a standalone module. So that was very useful. It gave me a lot more background knowledge. I also did a very practical course with Kath Bilsborough, and this course doesn't exist anymore, but now she's got a much bigger comprehensive course, which she developed with John Hughes. So the two of them run this course together. And I've heard it's excellent. So I haven't done this course. I have to say that I haven't done it, but I do know people that have done it, and they found it really valuable. So this is one thing that I would say, if you are looking to get into materials writing, or even if it's just for your students or for your school, and you feel like you need some training, I think a course like that would be a great investment. And I think it would also give you a lot of confidence, and you get feedback on your materials that you're writing from the tutors, and I think that really helps. It's very different from my first job that I was just describing, where I had no idea if what I was writing was any good until I got the feedback. So I think doing that kind of training is really helpful.
Awesome. I should mention as well, we do have a Padlet that we had during the live session where people could add questions. I know people are adding questions now on the YouTube channel. Fantastic.
Okay, great.
But we'll share the Padlet in the comments, and that's got the links to a lot of the courses that we're going to be chatting about. I've got a question which is coming from Esther for Michelle. With recent AI developments, how has your work changed? Do you think the future will need fewer materials writers?
Well, at the moment, I don't think so. I mean, specifically, I've been asked not to use AI in some of my materials writing projects, which is interesting. So I think at the moment, the publishers are very wary of using AI, and I suppose it's partly for legal reasons because we don't really know what's going to happen with AI. But I imagine that there are maybe smaller companies or maybe newer companies out there who are creating content who will be using AI. And I mean, I think to be honest, I've not really thought about this, but I'm thinking the things that I least enjoy writing, I think AI probably could write. So things like grammar exercises or test exercises and things like that, which are very, I think if you, I'm fairly sure that AI would be able to create that kind of exercise. And for me, that would be great because if I'm not saying I write them, I do write these types of exercises, but it's not my favorite part. So if we could, leverage AI to do those kind of more mundane, less creative tasks, then I think that would be positive. But we'll have to see where things go.
Very good question. Very good question. We've got another question from Simon, but I'll come back to that in a minute. First of all, over to Jordan. So how did you get into your role at ELT?
Yeah, so a bit of an interesting one. So I started off working in Seville anyway, at a really small school. There was only two teachers and the DOS. Then I moved to the Canary Islands and I worked at a slightly bigger school. So it was like maybe 6 or 7 teachers in that school. And then I moved back. When I moved back to Seville, I knew that I wanted to work in an even bigger school. Like I really liked having lots of colleagues. And I knew that I wanted to work in a bigger system, let's say. I enjoyed working in bigger schools, I think. So I started here at ELT because I knew it was one of the biggest schools, like you mentioned before. I was kind of already on my Delta journey as well. I started it when I was back in Lanzarote. I'd done Delta Module 1. I was about to start Delta Module 3. So I think that kind of helps as well, I don't think necessarily you always have to have a level 7 qualification, but I do think being involved and showing that you're interested in progressing academically does give your bosses or owners a really good indication that you're serious about it and that this is your job and your career. And I think when I started here as well, I think I probably did a good observation. I probably gave a good lesson, I imagine. Also, I think I got good recommendations from my line manager. So I was recommended. I think I did a good job while I was a teacher here. So I got a good recommendation from her. So thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. And then as well, I also organized a meeting with senior management about my professional interests. I'm really interested in diversity and inclusion. So I organized in my first couple of months here meetings with senior management about diversity and inclusion here in ELT. And I think that was taken quite well as well because it showed that I was thinking in a slightly different way and thinking about the school as of itself. And then, of course, opportunity and luck struck, and there was a director that was leaving. They needed someone to go in, and I'd only been in the company for about 2.5 months. So stillily, I applied, and yeah, they were great, and they gave me the job. So that's how I got into it.
Awesome. And I guess this is from your experience that it was an internal position. But were they looking for people outside of the school, or do you think a lot of these positions tend to be internally offered first?
Yeah, I think well, in Ellie's case, I think all of the hires are internal. And when I was chatting to other people, when I was kind of researching this talk and kind of getting it prepared, everyone who I spoke to, all of the cases were internal. So it might have been the case that they worked in a couple, well, kind of internal. They worked at a company and then they left and then they were invited back. So technically it's internal. And maybe some people were covering like a baja, so a leave of absence. They were covering a leave of absence and then they did a good job and they were brought back or kept on, let's say. Other cases, maybe they were like an assistant DOS and then they were put up to the main DOS role, or maybe they were doing a summer camp managerial role and then they were the year-round DOS or academic manager role. So yeah, it all seems to be internal. All these middle management or senior management roles all seem to be hired internally. And it's also the same when you look on LinkedIn as well. If you looked on jobs in ELT, in management, especially in Spain, which is where obviously I work, you don't really tend to see a lot of them. They really don't often come up. If they do come up, it tends to be for maybe franchises. And they're externally hiring because they don't have an internal person to promote because it's a new school that's opening. That can happen sometimes. But generally, at maybe more well-established schools, it will generally be an internal hire.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that helps as well that, moving into a senior position, it helps if you're already familiar with the systems within the school.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why my bosses at the beginning when they hired me were a little bit dubious about it because I only had maybe 2 or 3 months of experience with the system and the lessons and the levels and how we work and how we operate. So yeah, a lot of the times they want to hire from within because they want someone to go in and have that confidence to be able to talk about the system and the school. And also as well because they want you to kind of know the family, know the community, know the people that you're working with as well, because it's such a customer facing role. I think that's also important for them as well. I'm talking about all schools in general, just not just where I work. So yeah.
Mhm. And you mentioned as well that you were on your Delta journey.
I'm still
Uh,
on it. It's still happening, but yes.
because obviously as well for being a teacher trainer, externally you're required to have that level 7 qualification. But do you feel that the Delta helps prepare you for management roles?
I think it kind of depends on what kind of management role you had. As I mentioned before, we have DOSes and we have academic managers or people who kind of do more admin-based stuff. I don't know whether Delta or TESOL or a level or an MA in TESOL even would perhaps I don't think it's 100% necessary for a job that I do. I think it is beneficial if you do have further training so that because day to day I work with teachers and day to day teachers come to me with problems in their classes, behavioral management, how to teach grammar point, just typical staff room conversations. I think if you as a director have a further training and have advice that you can give, it can help your team and it can help your school in general. Obviously, they can always then go to the DOS or the academic managers. But I do think it helps if you have something, but I don't think it's necessarily in order to carry out my job. It's not that I'm using the things I've learned on Delta every day. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's completely necessary. I think it's maybe one of those desired qualifications, but if you don't have it, I think there are other things that are perhaps more important.
Mhm. And are there any other training qualifications that you've taken?
Yeah, so I've done the Nile course in language management. Is that the name of it? Management in Language Education. That's what it's called. Nile Management in Language Education. I've done that one. That was really, really nice. And I did it just at the beginning as well when I'd kind of just started. And it was really, really good to start thinking how I should be thinking. It kind of guided me on how to think. Also as well, IH International House, they do some training courses. So they have the DOS course, the Director of Studies course. I haven't done it just because when I looked through the syllabus, it didn't exactly apply to my job. There were some things yes, but some things no, so I haven't done that one yet. But also that they do have other short courses for management. So things like team communication, managing customer service. So I've actually enrolled on the managing customer service course in September. So I haven't done it yet, but I will be doing it. And I'll report back. But they're kind of, I think the courses seem, kind of impression that I get, they seem to be developing more and more training providers seem to be adding more courses. Maybe it's the same as what Michelle was saying with materials writing. There maybe wasn't many before, but now there kind of are. Other training courses maybe as well. I haven't done it, but I know it exists, is the Delt M that English UK offers. And also as well, if you do Delta, the module 3, which is the kind of course design, you can do it with a management focus as well. I didn't do it because I'd kind of already started beforehand and I'd already done some prep. There aren't many training providers that offer the management focus on the Delta Module 3. I think ITI Istanbul, when I was doing some searching, did offer it, but there wasn't many others. But if you are doing Delta and you are interested in management or you're already in a management role, then it is an option that you can look at as well.
So, fantastic.
So what about
And what
teacher
about
training,
you?
T? Tell us how you got into teacher training.
Yeah.
So yeah, my teacher training journey kind of started when I delivered my first presentation at a conference that was TESOL Spain in Seville back in 2009. And then I kind of got the bug and thought, this is what I want to do. And as well, at the same time, I wanted to change schools. I wanted to go and work in a school that I'd seen other teachers from the school at conferences over the past few years, and I wanted to be in a school that I felt really appreciated teacher development and would develop their teachers, and it was an integral part of their ethic. So I started working at Active Language. in Cadiz. And then I was there for a few years, and they offered to train me up as a Cert TESOL tutor. So at the time, I hadn't done my DIP TESOL, but then I started it kind of, I think, 1 or 2 years after I'd started teacher training on the Cert TESOL. And so then I just carried on as a teacher trainer in the summer, whilst working full-time as a teacher and also doing a bit of academic management at the school. And then I can't remember exactly when I started working on the DIP TESOL. It was when I was still at Active Language, and we offered the Unit 4, so the teaching assessments, we offered them at the school in the summer. And so I was trained up then to do that. That was after I'd finished my DIP TESOL. And now I do I still do the Unit 4, so the teaching assessments, and I run a couple of the modules on Oxford TEFL's DIP TESOL course. Yes.
So what do you think that can, if people want to get into teacher training, maybe if they don't have any experience, or even if maybe they do have experience, but they're looking for a new teacher training role, like what would you suggest?
Also, I think as well, teacher training can take lots and lots of different forms. So there is this kind of standardized Cambridge, Trinity teacher training, but also you'll quite often find publishers look for teacher trainers, exam boards look for teacher trainers. So I've just started working with Language Cert as well, and I do some teacher training for them. But I mean, if you've ever seen Cambridge presentations about their exams or Trinity conferences, the people who are doing that are teacher trainers as well. So certainly, look at publishers, look at exam boards, see if there's anything. And as well, teacher training, it can just be internal. It can be something that you set up within your own school if you don't think anything is particularly happening. And even if things are happening, offer to run a session and start out.
And then just going back to what you were saying then, I'm just saying Simon was very happy with the active language shout out in the comments. And obviously in active language where you started, I guess they had these two sides of things. They had their English language school and then their training center. How, is that common? Is that common to see? I don't know. Are there a lot of schools that have the two sides of things? Like Oxford House and Oxford TEFL, is that common to find or not, do you think?
I think a lot of places will, simply because teacher training, you might not necessarily be running courses year round. So certainly active language, they have the language school, and like you said, Oxford TEFL, Oxford House, they have the language school and the teacher training. I've worked for another company, Learn Direct, which is just a training provider, not just for ELT, but for for nursing, for everything. So I think it very much depends on the organization. But yes, one thing I will say is that in terms of becoming a standardized teacher trainer, you do need to find a center that will train you up. So Trinity themselves don't offer any sort of training that you can take. You have to approach a center and say, I'm interested in becoming a trainer. Can you train me up? And that's how you'll get into it. And I think it's probably the same for Cambridge as well.
Okay, interesting. And then you did your Cert TESOL, and then you did your Trinity DIP TESOL, and then you were trained up by a centre. And then going on from that, are there any other qualifications or courses that you can do for teacher training that would help you to get a job, or that you should do while you're actively working as a teacher trainer?
This is where it shows who's done their research and who hasn't. I believe that Oxford TEFL do run they run teacher development courses, and I think they do have one. I think Duncan Ford, the organizer, I think he's recently set up one on kind of giving feedback. So that would obviously be beneficial for people in that role. But in terms of formal qualifications, not really. As long as generally for most roles, you require that level 7 qualification, DIP, TESOL or Delta. But similarly to the management, it's not that the qualification prepares you to be a teacher trainer. It just, again, shows your dedication to the profession, shows your level of knowledge and depth of understanding. Mhm.
I think Niall also has a teacher, I think it's called teacher to trainer, I think it's called. Niall also has one. I was looking at it just the other day. Yeah, so Niall does have one as well. I've never done it. I don't know how practical it is. I think it is an online based course. I don't know what the setup is, but I do know that it exists.
So Cambridge used to run the teacher to trainer or something course. I think they no longer run it as an open course. I think they run it within centres, but it's kind of an internal thing. But they do have this book, which is great, From Teacher to Trainer. So I'm currently working my way through that.
So you have done your research, T.
So I have done a little bit of research.
You've got a book beside you, which is more than I've got. So.
Awesome. So what else do you think can help you get the job you want? Michelle, you mentioned before kind of having a blog and meeting people at conferences and things and interacting with other people. What else or anything else that would help?
Well, I think going to conferences and speaking at conferences can help. I think it's changed a bit from when I started, because that's what people always used to say: go to conferences, present at conferences. It was like recommended. It was the recommended thing to get yourself known and get your face out there. I think it can still be a good thing to do, not least for the experience of doing it. But I think that in a lot of conferences these days, you won't find so many editors. So I know a lot of people have said, oh, I got my first materials writing role because an editor was in my session at a conference and they said, would you like to write for us? And I from what I've noticed and heard, I don't think so many editors are sent by the publishers to conferences anymore. It's more the sales team. But I still think it's a good thing to do. But now we have so many more opportunities online. You don't really need to go to a face-to-face conference to get yourself known. You could have a YouTube channel. You could be on social media. What I would say is, if you are interested in writing materials for a publisher, I'd say create your own materials first, and share them online, share them with other people, share them with other teachers in teachers groups, in communities. You could do this probably for free at first, I'd say. If you're sharing your materials for free, that will hopefully lead to more people using them, trying them out. Try to get feedback as well on these materials. So especially if you're giving them away for free, then you can kind of, ask people, would you mind giving me some feedback on this? And just share them everywhere. Share them on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever platforms you use, and in all of the teachers groups you're in. There are people doing this already, quite a few people doing this. Some friends of ours, such as Silvina Masiti, Peter Fullaga, they are creating and sharing materials, some for free, some they're selling. See what they're doing, follow people like this, see how they're doing it, have a look at their materials as well and see what kind of things they're doing. I'd say this is a really good way to get started now. If you're consistently posting good materials online, it's likely that you will catch someone's eye, an editor from a publisher. And then once you've built up a bit of a portfolio and you've got some materials, then I'd suggest trying to find out the names of the commissioning editors at different publishers, maybe local ones to start with in your country. and ones that are involved in the type of writing that you want to do. So, for example, if you want to write primary materials, you need to find out who is in charge of primary materials, who's commissioning for primary. If you want to write exam materials, find out who is the commissioning editor for exams, etc. And just send them a message on LinkedIn. Send them a message. Hi, I'm interested in writing materials. I've already created these materials. You can find them here. And yeah, that's what I would suggest if it's something that you want to get into.
And I
Awesome.
guess as well with LinkedIn as well, Michelle, that it's a lot easier now, I imagine, to find the people that you need to get in contact with, right? Like you can, looking for the primary publisher or editor for Macmillan, let's say, you can it's a lot easier to find them now, right?
Yeah, well, yes, it is and it isn't because you never know. But editors are not, well, some editors may be on LinkedIn all day, but they're not on LinkedIn as much as freelancers are because they've got really busy jobs. So they might not always, respond to your message or see your message, or they might see it, a few weeks down the line. But yes, you can find them. So I think in the old days, people used to have to phone up the publishing company and the switchboard and say, "Can you pass me, onto the whoever," or just to find out the names of the people that you need to contact. It was more difficult. Yeah. So I think definitely LinkedIn is the place to try to contact people. Just send them a message. You won't be able to email them. But I think you probably could phone them up and find out their email addresses. I'm not sure how much information people are allowed to give out these days. But yeah, so I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best first step.
I'm going to come back to Simon's question here now. How much do you think it's about building your brand? How do you feel about that? Is it a constant hustle?
Yeah, both, I guess. I think if you have the time and the space to do that brand building, it's only going to be positive. But what happens at the beginning is you're just happy kind of to take on any work that comes your way, kind of thing. And even if it's not exactly what you want to do. So you might have to, if you say you want to be writing for primary, you might have to do some secondary materials because, well, it's another way of getting more experience, developing your craft as a writer as well. So, but if you know that you want to write something specific, then yes, try to build up your brand around that. So, with your social media content, if you want to write for primary, make it about primary, make it for primary teachers, etc. I think it is important. But again, I think it is something that takes time to build up that presence in a niche. I think we might talk a bit about niches later if we have time. But I think it's definitely helpful. I can't see the comments on YouTube, so you're going to have to just read them. I can't find them.
There's some lovely chat between Simon and Harry.
Okay. Hi.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Jordan, anything else that you think would help people if they're looking at getting into management?
Yeah, so I think, like I said before, putting yourself somewhere, like we were talking before, T, a lot of hires are internal. I think Harry may have actually corrected me though. I was looking at the chat that he thought that maybe smaller schools may involve more external calls, which may very well may be the case. But if you're looking for a management position, I would say put yourself somewhere where there is a system in place. It's maybe a bigger school or a bigger system whereby these jobs are maybe more likely to come up when an opportunity strikes. Also as well, start, like Michelle was saying about networking, start meeting people who are also managers, find out whether you would actually like the job, hear about the realities of the job from some managers or from bosses, see what they do day to day, see whether you think it would be a right fit. there's lots of different types of management roles. Maybe you'd be more suited to like a temporary summer management position as opposed to a year-round one. Maybe a part-time one as opposed to a full-time one. Just find out what it is that you would like to do before you go full steam ahead, and just find out what would suit your life better as well. I would do that. And then what I would also do is ask your line manager as well. If you're working under someone currently, speak to them. There's no one that knows you better than your current line manager and knows you professionally, as well as your line manager. So have a chat with them, see if they think that you'd be a good fit. Try to get some honest feedback from them to see whether you would be suited to that kind of role. And also as well, maybe and ask them like what things they think that you're missing. So what elements of your skill base do they think that you're missing? What do they think you need to work on more or develop more? And then have a think about how you can gain those skills. So whatever your manager says that you're missing, think, okay, what can I do? They're saying I need more customer-facing experience. They're saying I need to practice my Spanish more, if that's the language that you'd be working in. Or I need more experience with the different levels within the school. How can I go about that? And then go and do it. So ask for more levels at the schools. Ask if you can sit in on some customer conversations, or if you can sit with the receptionist for a bit and listen to how they communicate and maybe get involved. And try to spend some time gaining those skills so that when opportunity does strike, you're ready and your manager knows that you're interested in, that you're implicated in doing it. And then also, we talked about courses before. You don't have to be a manager to do courses. That was one of the questions that we got from Asaiya. You don't need to be a manager to do management courses. If you're interested, you can apply to them. You might need to come at them from a slightly different angle. You might need to answer some tasks as if you were your manager. But there is no reason why you can't start implicating yourself in management courses and just doing them and starting to show that you're interested. I think as long as you're showing interest within the company that you're in, and you're showing that you're proactive and wanting to gain the missing skills, then when opportunity strikes, then it's time.
Great advice, great advice. And I would say as well, maybe if you're working in a school that doesn't have that position, maybe look at whether that is missing, and perhaps, suggest,
Create a role.
you might have like the school owners who may be teaching as well, and then there might be the team of teachers, and maybe there is no kind of middleman to take on some of those roles.
I was talking to one of my friends / colleagues when I was preparing all of this, and she did exactly the same thing. She was working in quite a big franchise here in Seville that will go unnamed, and they had quite a big there was a lot of opportunity to develop into business English and business classes, and she saw the potential. She saw that she felt that she could do it, and she went to the boss and she said, I want to be this cool. I want to be the coordinator of the business classes. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Give me 3 months. Give me 4 months. Let me just see what I can do. And she ended up doing incredibly well, and she created a whole new sector of the company. So yeah, another great piece of advice is if you're in a system or a smaller system or a bigger system, and you see potential to develop something, definitely put it forward. It might, like my friend did, it might turn into a full-time year-round job, definitely.
Nice.
And what about you, T? Is there anything else that you think would
I mean,
help?
similarly to Michelle, I think presenting at conferences, it shows that you're able to deliver information, that you're able to share activities and explain activities. And again, it gives you a bit of a portfolio to build up for when you're looking for teacher training roles. I can't remember what else I had written down. Oh, yeah, in-house training, like I mentioned before. If it's already a part of your school system, great, get involved. And if it isn't, maybe suggest it. And I'm going to do a quick shout out now to Tefel del Sword. If you're working in a school that doesn't offer teacher development, and you feel, or you approach management and they're really not interested, reach out to other schools locally. Maybe there might be other teachers who would be interested in doing something and getting together on an informal basis to kind of get that development that they're lacking within their own institutions. Yeah. I would say that.
I think that kind of leads on to what we were going to mention next, which is about community and building networks. No, so if you can create a little community or network of teachers, you know, who are doing something similar to you, or it's just a way of meeting people, sharing ideas and getting that support that you might not have, because not all workplaces have support. And I think if you're a freelance teacher or a freelance materials writer or a freelance teacher trainer, whatever you are, if you're freelance, then you don't have that because you work alone. So I think having some kind of community, being in groups on social media, also help with that. So for example, I'm in several groups, quite a lot of groups on Facebook. I only go on Facebook now to go into these groups. So the TEFL Development Hub is one such group, one such community where, you know, that we've got teachers from all over the world in this group, all lots of different contexts, teachers teaching different age groups, doing different things. But it's just a nice place where we can ask for help, we can ask questions, we can help each other answer each other's questions, share resources, share things that we find that can help others. So I think that's really important in general.
Definitely.
I
And I
mean,
think
we're
also,
all in the TEFL Development Hub, so
yeah. I think also another way of kind of building community, apart from, you know, the TEFL Development Hub that you mentioned, Michelle, LinkedIn. We spoke also before about conferences, local, national, international, but also cohort-based courses, I think, can be a really nice way to build community as well, because you're meeting people who are in a similar position to you or have similar interests to you, and they're always very, very keen to keep in touch as well. So if you do a Niall course or Michelle's course, or any other type of course that is cohort-based, you're able to meet other people who have exactly the same interests as you, and just making sure that you keep in contact with them. And you never know what can come from those kinds of conversations.
And also with some smaller courses, so like maybe more independent courses, often these have like a community with them, like a Facebook group that then you might stay in that group after you finish the course or the program, whatever. And as more participants go through, then they're also in that group, and that creates a nice little community as well. Because I'm in a few groups like that as well.
Fantastic.
Uh,
Awesome. So we've
Are there
covered
any?
building your network. Oh, what were you going to
Yeah,
say,
no,
Michelle?
I was just going to say, because we were going to, if there are any specific groups apart from the TEFL Development Hub that either of you would recommend, but I mean, not necessarily for teacher training or for academic management, but groups that just you think help create that connection with other ELT professionals.
Well, I think the ELT Freelance Publishers Group that Michelle and we're both in, that's another place for kind of, like Michelle said, asking questions, you know, griping a little bit about conditions as well at times. So I think that's a really good group. Yep.
I have to admit, I'm really bad with groups. I'm not. I'm not. I'm in the TEFL Development Hub. I'm also part of Reflecting. I was just checking the name of it, Reflecting Realities, Diverse and Inclusive ELT Materials, which I think is run by Lottie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I am part of that one. But in terms of specific management ones, I don't know. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to do some investigating. Management Facebook groups, and I'll find out, and I'll put it on a Padlet.
Maybe there aren't any.
Maybe I need to start one.
I mean, there are some big groups on LinkedIn, like ELT Professionals. Is that one on LinkedIn? I'm on that, but I think on LinkedIn it's harder. You don't necessarily get that group feel for me as much as a Facebook group. I think I was going for materials writing. There are also things like the IATEFL Materials Writing Special Interest Group. That if you're a member of IATEFL, or there are other associations as well. So like I know that TESOL in Brazil also has a materials writing special interest group. So if you are a member of an association like these ones, they might have like a specific group dedicated to materials development, which I think is it's good for meeting people and networking, but it's also good for things like webinars and training and just general support.
Yeah, I mean, I think Simon's just mentioned this as well, LAMSIG, which is the
Yeah,
Leadership and Management SIG for ITEFL, and they also have a a teacher education SIG
yeah.
as well. So yeah, certainly within ITEFL, there are kind of niche special interest groups that you could
The
use.
teacher development SIG as well, the TD SIG.
Mhm,
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. I've written that one down.
mhm. Awesome. Um, Qualities and skills, anything in particular that you think helps you in your role, Jordan?
Hmm. Qualities or skills. I would say, well, first of all, if you're working in a context where English is not the first language, language skills, you need to be able to communicate with customers. And I think also as well, you need to be able to be quite clear in that language as well. I think a lot of the times when you start kind of moving up the levels and we're looking at exams and exam dates and fees and things like that, is sometimes there's very specific language that we have to be using. We have to be very careful with how we express things and how we get the message across. So I think, first of all, you need to have quite good second language skills in whatever context, if it's necessary for you to have it. And you also need to be able to be quite precise and quite clear in that language, and also be able to communicate things that maybe seem like common knowledge to you, but doesn't seem like common knowledge to the customer. So if we're even talking about levels, A1, A2, B1, sometimes I say those words, or letters and numbers, and they're not understood. So you have to kind of break it down. And then sometimes as well, we talk about skills-based learning or skills or building skills up, and that it's about explaining concepts to customers. So I think that's quite important, is to be a really clear communicator, and also as well is to be quite a tactful communicator as well. I think sometimes quite uncomfortable situations can arise occasionally, or complaints might come in, or whatever that may be, and you need to be able to manage conversations quite well. It's something that I'm still learning how to do, but it can be quite a challenge. You know, this is a private sector. This is a private company. People pay money to be here. And when you're a customer, you have certain expectations, which is completely understandable. And then frustrations can arise when you don't get what you wanted. So being able to manage that is definitely a skill that I'm still developing. And then just in general, you need to be quite a good people's person, which I appreciate is quite hard to develop and train, but you can. You need to be quite a good people person. You need to kind of have you just need to have good people skills, and then also as well, you need to be quite empathetic. You need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the customer or the teacher or your boss, you know, because oftentimes you get, that's kind of one of the things about my job, is you're kind of in the middle of this ecosystem. Let's say, you know, you have admin, you have senior management, you have teachers, you have customers, you have students, kind of all these people in the middle, and you're in the middle of all these people. So you need to be empathetic to all of these people and understand where they're all coming from, and also manage communication between them, which is also a fun one. So yeah, and then also you need to be incredibly organized. You know, it doesn't matter if you're running a school of 2 teachers, if you're running a school of 20, you still need to be an organized person and make sure that nothing falls through the gaps. Obviously, you're going to miss things, but you need to be incredibly on top of it. And also, I think as well, that a skill that I've been talking to some of my teachers about recently is they always say to me, like, Jordan, you don't seem stressed, you seem really calm. And I feel like that's a weird skill as well. Like internally, I'm, you know, it's like a duck when they're in water, you know, like I'm really stressed, something like it's terrible, I'm having the worst time. But just visually, I look good, you know? And I often think that I'm kind of like, you know, like air stewards on planes. Like if they're stressed, you need to be stressed. But because, you know, I've been able to put this like poker face on, that's kind of something that I've been developing recently, and I think is working wonders. Everyone else here that works with me seems quite calm because I think I'm just calm, you know. So yeah, those I would say are the things that are like skills or qualities that I think would help to be an actor, like an academic manager. It's quite a social role, you know.
I'm going to jump in just to basically say a lot of those skills are good for teacher training as well. I think definitely kind of the communication skills, being able to explain things clearly is really important. I know when I got feedback on the feedback that I was giving teachers, Danny, who was the head trainer, she kind of said, stop using "you could do this," use an imperative. You know, if you say you could do this, they'll take it as a suggestion, but really you want them to be doing XYZ. So yeah, making sure that you're explaining yourself clearly and not being too polite. I think
I think it's
often
like
British
finding
teachers
that limit,
forget.
right, between giving feedback on something that you know needs to change, but you want them to take it well. You don't want them to be offended, and you're like, oh, how do I put this? And you don't want to be too nice because they might just take it as a suggestion. It's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah.
It's a
And I
fine
think
balance.
definitely, yeah, organization as well. As I mentioned at the start, you're kind of helping other people to be organized. So being organized yourself is definitely a key. And yeah, people skills in terms of, for a lot of people, it's quite a stressful time.
Mm.
You know, when people do the cert TESOL, we now run it over 6 weeks. A lot of centers run it over 4. So you know they have a lot to get through in those 4 or 6 weeks, and it can be quite a stressful time, especially if they're doing it and they've kind of come to our center in Cadiz. You know, they're in a new place, there's new food, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And then as well, when people come to do the dip TESOL, it's quite funny because when they do the dip TESOL, the Unit 4 assessments, they have to teach 5 lessons. And you say to someone, you're going to teach 5 lessons. And it's like, I teach 5 lessons every afternoon. But it takes a month. And it's really intensive and very stressful and a lot of work. So I think, again, having that calm kind
Mhm.
of, you can do this, let's talk
It's
through the
gonna be okay.
steps.
It's all gonna
Yeah.
work out. I trust in the process. Yeah. Quite reassuring, I guess you have to be, right?
Mhm. And Michelle, anything else, qualities and skills wise, as a materials writer?
Loads. No, but I actually just hearing you both, and I'm thinking, I'm so glad I don't do your jobs, especially Jordan's. I would be terrible at it. Yeah, no. I think so. Maybe you don't need the people skills so much as a materials writer, but you do need some of the others as well, because you know you're the clarity thing. You need to be able to write very clear instructions, whether it's just in the students' materials or if it's in the teacher's book, or if it's an artwork brief, you've got to write what you want in the artwork. The artist needs to be able to understand exactly what you want and how you want it to look.
Mhm.
Because this is something I didn't mention before, but when you're writing for example, a page in a student's book, for example, it's got a lot of different elements. So it's got the rubrics, which need to be super clear and at the right level. It's got the activity notes, so what you want the activity to look like on the page. It's got the artwork. It's got design notes, how you want the page to look. It might have audio scripts, video scripts. So all of these things, they're actually all different skills that you need to learn or develop, but you develop them on the job. And I think this is what you were saying as well, Jordan. So a lot of these skills or qualities, they're not things that are inherent to us or our personalities. Well, maybe the people skills maybe is a bit more of a personality thing, but they're just things that you can develop, and you'll develop them as you work, no, the more you write, the more you develop these skills. But there are loads of other skills as well. You were talking about feedback. Well, as a writer, you're receiving the feedback rather than giving it. Interpreting feedback isn't always as easy as you might think, because it's not always clear. So it also depends on how clear that feedback is, that the editor's given you, because sometimes they might use a lot of heading, like you were saying, Tina. Oh, it might be a good idea to, and you're not sure whether they're saying change this activity or this is just a suggestion, like you said. So it's a matter of interpretation. I think there are loads of skills regarding freelancing in general. So whether you're a materials writer, a teacher trainer, a teacher, or any other kind of role that's freelance, there are lots of skills involved with that, and running your own business. I don't think we're going to have time to go into those, but just things like managing your time is a really important one. Being able to work independently, and organize yourself, things like that.
Talking of time, when we did this session at Athea, we had 45 minutes, and we did not have enough time to get through everything. We're up to the hour. I mean, I can stay on because I know that we have another couple of points that we want to get through. So, I mean, Michelle, you mentioned kind of freelancing has its own skills and qualities. What do you love about your job, and what are the challenges?
So what I love the most is the flexibility. So the flexibility and the variety. Because when I was teaching, I loved teaching, but it was basically the same every day. The same timetable, the same groups every, twice a week. And, it didn't have that much variety. Well, the students are the ones who give you that, that variety. But being freelance means that I can work whichever hours suit me. So if I need to take a day off in the middle of the week, I can do. Or if I'm not feeling very inspired and I'm trying to work and I can't do it now. I'll go and I can go and watch Netflix for half an hour and come back later, or do it on Sunday. I can choose my hours, my working hours. Although when you've got a deadline, it can be tricky. So that's one thing. And another thing is being able to take time off to go and do things like attend the IATEFL conference, which I could never do when I was teaching. I couldn't take time off during term time. So now I can take that time off, a week off, and go to the UK for that conference. And then the variety, because I can work on lots of different things. I can maybe have a longer project, which is maybe a course book, but then I can work on lots of smaller things at the same time or in between. There are sometimes some periods between projects where you can do other things. It's allowed me also to develop my own thing, my own resources and my own training course. Which I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I was, teaching full time, for example. So having that variety, doing a little bit of training, doing the odd webinar, writing materials for publishers, writing my own materials, that gives me that variety in my week. So those are and of course, mustn't forget this, knowing that there are students and teachers out there using your materials to learn and teach English. Now, I can only imagine this because I don't actually know, but I like to think that there are some children really enjoying learning English through my materials. That's what I hope, anyway.
There definitely are. There definitely are.
Yeah, yeah. And any challenges?
So most of the challenges, I guess, for me are things to do with freelancing. So the precarity, don't know which is the right word, of it. Not having, a regular income, things like high social security and taxes and things here in Spain, but that's obviously a local thing. And and then sometimes things like taking holidays, because it's quite hard to manage, I find sometimes. So when I'm taking on a new project, and sometimes I feel like I have to say, okay, so I need to take a week off in September because my partner has booked his holidays for September, and that might be in the middle of a project. And it might be possible, or it usually is possible, but you need to, think about these things up front, because the freelance lifestyle, when your partner, your family has a more structured, kind of employee-based lifestyle, can be quite difficult to balance. So, yeah. Do you find the same thing, some of the similar things, T, as a freelancer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the variety. As I said at the start, teacher training isn't the only thing I do, but even just within teacher training, there are a lot of different roles that I have, and really enjoy that. The flexibility as well of being able to work online in from different places and take time off more or less when you want to. But like you say, sometimes there are moments of I've got to do 12 hours days for the next weeks to get everything done, which I have done in the past as well. So yeah, I think yeah, and just working with so many different people as well is really nice. Um, when you do the cert ESOL, obviously it's with your students, so the centre provides the students, um, and so it's a context that's perhaps more familiar to you. But then when you do the DIP TESOL, teachers can be observed teaching their own students, so then you get to see a lot of different classroom environments and different teaching styles as well, which I think is really great. And then in terms of challenges, yeah, similarly, the precarity of have I got enough work this month and will I get paid for this work this month? Um, but yeah, do Nickel Apprentice's course on making sure you've got a nest egg and some savings and you'll be fine. And Jordan, what about you?
Well, the things I love about my job. The things that I love about it is it's a very social role, like what I was talking before. I'm kind of at the center of lots of different people. I have communication with lots of different people. So I'm a very social person. When I'm at work, anyway, when I go home, I lay down in a dark room and shut myself off. But when I'm at work, I really, really, really enjoy it. I love talking to people, meeting people, and building up relationships as well over time. I really like as well. When you start working with a family or you start working with a teacher, at the beginning and over the years, you see, or not even over the years, over a year even. Like you start with a family in September and in June they've got their certificate or they've got the result. I really like that, seeing that progression and also building those relationships with people. I really like how diverse and kind of multifaceted my role is. I do a lot of different things day to day. I also weirdly like how demanding my job is, especially at like specific times of the year. Like September, for example, for me is a crazy year, and it's kind of like 1 minute I'm just so busy, and I really really like how demanding it is. I have got quite a lot of like internal energy. I'm a very like nervous person. I think that's a bit of like it's a bit of Spanish intrusion. I'm a very nervous person, and I really like having that like demanding job to get rid of all that energy. I also really like being involved in teachers' professional development as well, like guiding them through that process. I find it a really enjoyable process, like helping teachers see how they can develop and what they can develop into. Last year, but previous two years, I worked at a smaller school in Ellie, and I was working with a teacher. I'm sure she won't mind me saying her name, Indiana. And she had loads of like really creative ideas for like exam prep. And I was like, why don't you give a training session in Ellie about this? Like, why don't you have a chat to the DOS, put yourself forward and just do it? She was really nervous, like, just try it, just do it, just see what happened. And she did. And then it's kind of snowballed into teacher training for her. And she's still at the beginning, but it's so fascinating to see. Like she's now going to be giving an online webinar for Macmillan, and it's kind of just like turned into something really exciting for her. So being part of that process is really, really rewarding. And those kind of things I really, really enjoy. Then challenges, I guess. Well, it was a pro and a con, kind of being in the middle of everyone. And I mentioned it before when I was talking about skills, like managing communication between different groups of people can be quite challenging. Also working with customers. I love working with the public, but also managing expectations, I think, and realities and expectations. Like, for example, someone might come into me and say, I want to get my B2 this year. And I say, and then we start doing the level test, and I'm like, oh God, okay, how do I match the expectation of this customer? Because I don't think it's realistic for them to be going into an exam prep group. I think it's more realistic to go into maybe a foundational B2 year or a B1 exam level. And managing that conversation and taking them down that garden path, as I like to think of it as, and getting them from A to B is really, really, really challenging. And it never gets easier. It hasn't got easier yet. Maybe one day it will get easy, but it hasn't got easier yet. So yeah, those are the challenging things about it, which I think are very different to your challenges. I feel like T and Michelle, you kind of mentioned freelancing and the the way that freelancing, especially here in Spain, is set up anyway, is kind of like the challenge. And yeah, so my challenge is very different to yours.
But I would say as well, managing expectations, obviously you have to give feedback to teachers, and sometimes they can come out of a class thinking it went very well, and you have to explain why perhaps it didn't go as well. Admittedly, most people are more at the other end. They come out all doom and gloom, and this went wrong, and this was terrible, and da da da. So then it's much more about boosting them up. But yeah, you do get the odd person who perhaps it's their first time, maybe they've been teaching for years and they've never been observed. And their students have been getting results, and nobody's ever said, actually, you might consider doing that in a different way. So yeah, I think
we are then having very similar conversations, but just with different people about different things.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
Well, we are going to chat a little bit about what other jobs are out there, but before we do that, any final comments about either of your roles?
I don't think so. I think I've said everything.
I think I was going to say something before, but it's gone. It's gone. So
It comes back, add it as a comment
if it comes
afterwards.
back, I'll add a comment.
Awesome. So, teacher training, academic management, director of studies, materials writing. What else can people do? So Vicky shared this chat on LinkedIn and said, when I first started teaching, I just imagined that I would open my own school, and I did as well. Because my first job was in a very small school. There were the two bosses who owned the school who also taught, and then there were three teachers. Two of the teachers were a couple, and at the time that I joined, they were talking about opening a franchise of the school in another town. So immediately I was just like, all right, so I work here for a few years and then I open up my own little version of it. I would have hated it. Yeah, definitely. So what else is available? Owning your own school, obviously. Any other roles you can think of?
I
And
think
I think it depends. I was going to say it depends on your context as well, because I mean, I was like you, I worked in a very small school. We didn't have a director of studies or anything. So in that school, there weren't any other roles. Like it's like you said, here at the time in Jerez, there weren't really big schools. There's one bigger school, but so you need to look at your kind of local area and think what schools are there. If you want to have a role in a school, such as what Jordan is doing or something similar, or consider moving maybe to a bigger city. I don't know. But I think now there are more roles available and also kind of related to materials writing, but not actual materials, such as like content creation and things like that. I think these days, a lot of publishers, for example, probably looking, they haven't told me this, but it's just the kind of the idea that I get, looking for people who can do social media for them. So not just, so they've got their marketing teams, but they need people, who are teachers, people who are whatever, who can do social media. They can do videos for TikTok and things like that, blogging for them, all these kind of things. And they're just, yeah, you're not going to be able to probably do that full time, but it's maybe a way of supplementing your teaching job or something else. So I think that's something that is probably only going to get bigger.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, so no, I was just going to say kind of publishers, One Stop English as well, approaching them to write articles, British Council as well, looking at different places that might be interested in some sort of content, online content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all part of their marketing, their content marketing.
And I think you're both completely right. I think especially I've kind of been fascinated recently by Instagram English teachers and TikTok English teachers. I find it fascinating. And I've also seen, I follow a couple on Instagram and a couple on TikTok as well, and they've started to get like paid to post ads. Maybe they're doing an italki ad or maybe a Duolingo ad, and they're posting. So they post English learner content, and they have a considerable amount of followers, and they're now getting paid to post ads for publishers, which I think is really interesting.
Mhm.
And also TikTok as well. Like whenever I go home, I get on TikTok. There's like someone doing like an English class with a whiteboard. Like I find it fascinating. I don't know if that pays money, but depending on your country and the creator fund, maybe it does cash out. But yeah, I find it fascinating. But then I think also as well, if we're thinking about other jobs as well, I think a lot of English teachers become examiners for different qualifications. I think Cambridge examining is slightly easier than Trinity examining, from what I understand. T, maybe you know more of this than I do.
Oh, I think for Cambridge examining, it's more local. So
Mm.
you'll be kind of you'll work in your local area, whereas for Trinity, they'll send you, you won't examine in your local area. They'll send you
And
off
it's in
to other
blocks of like
places.
a week or 2 weeks, right? You get to
Yeah,
full-time English teacher couldn't do Trinity examining. That's kind of what I was
it's
referring to.
trickier. Yeah, yeah.
Full-time English teacher could do Cambridge examining on Fridays or on Saturdays, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, examining also, I know like it's not technically connected, but even just invigilating exams as well. That's another option. If you're too worried or concerned about doing examining it yourself, you can be an invigilator as well.
Wow.
So that's another option.
Yep, definitely. And then one thing that we touched on earlier that it would be good to get into a little bit more detail is niche, finding your
Mm.
niche in ELT. So I mean, Jordan, you're, you know, the story about the friend who kind of became a niche person within an organization, that's very motivating as well. And then obviously you, if you're a freelance, you can find your niche. Um, whether it's young learners, business English, exam preparation as well. You'll find people again on TikTok, Instagram selling themselves as IELTS preparers and things like that. What other kind of niches
I
have
mean,
you
to be
seen?
honest, I wouldn't probably call those things a niche because they're too broad to be a niche. They're very young, young learners. But that's absolutely huge. That is, even if it was just primary or pre-primaries, it's still very broad. There's still and exams. Well, that's huge. I mean, maybe if it's a very specific exam, So I think I mean, there will be loads of other teachers who are doing those same things. So you need to find something a bit more specific, I think, especially if you're going to do it freelance. So I wouldn't say my niche isn't primary. That's not a niche. That's a sector, I guess, or I guess it's a sector of publishing or teaching. So my niche is inquiry-based learning. That's something very specific. It could be something like that, project-based learning. It could be I don't know, I'm not very good at
English for
English, but
aviation, which
yes,
is our
English for
friend who does.
aviation.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Nikki's doing. She's got
Yeah.
this business, English for pilots, people who are training to be pilots. So there's somebody who I know who does English for landscape gardeners. That is a niche, a very narrow niche. But
Now that is a
so
niche.
what? Sorry.
That is definitely a niche. English
That's
for
a it's a very niche. Um,
landscape.
But yeah, and also business English isn't also, I don't think, a niche. Again, it's a sector. So if you like doing business English and you want to do more business English, but you want to differentiate yourself from everybody else, so you're probably going to have to find something more specific. What do those people who want to learn business English, what do they actually need? And, how can you provide that?
Mm.
Mhm.
So,
Excellent.
mm.
Yep. I think we've mentioned all the roles that we had thought about.
Did we keep? We didn't keep it, did we? When we did the session at FAEA and we wrote on a piece of paper, we wrote on a flip chart people's ideas. And did you take a photo?
I did not. I have
So
to admit.
because there were
Yeah.
more than these ideas. There were more ideas that people came up with.
Yep. Yep,
If
probably.
you have
But
ideas, write them in the comments.
yeah. Oh, and that is one thing that I will say. So I interviewed Martin Hayek a few weeks ago, and he has a book, More Than a Gap Year Adventure, and it's all about ELT. In his introduction, he kind of talks about some of the things he loves and the challenges and realities of the profession. And then there are a series of essays, articles from experts in different aspects. So, you know, talking to teacher trainers, talking to people about opening their own schools. So it's definitely worth reading that as well. I'll share another link to it.
And the Padlet, if people have questions still, you can add them to the Padlet. I don't know if the link is here. Maybe we can put it in the description of the video.
I'll pop it
It's
in
not
the
there.
description. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. And or feel free to comment with a chat. It's been lovely to see Simon, Esther, Elsa's turned up as well, and Harry. Michelle was there as well.
Finally.
So thank you both, Michelle and Jordan, for coming along and sharing your experiences. Thank you everyone who's watching and who will be watching in the future. Like we said, if you've got any more questions, feel free to drop us a comment in the chat.